The business owner is often a big bottleneck in the business, and things aren't either getting done or the business isn't driving forward because the business owner's trying to do too much.
Businesses operating inside ecosystems grow revenue twice as fast than those using isolated suppliers.
A lot of people that you speak to, they're not actually very clear on what they want or where they want to go. It's quite thought-provoking, and they start thinking about, I'm not sure about that, and it sort of gets them thinking about what they really want from their business.
And I've never met a business owner who's an expert in all of those different aspects. So typically you're good at one or maybe two of those hats.
Those that do invest the time in sitting down and working on the business, they're the ones that will really get the real momentum.
So welcome back to Build with Dean, the show about building a business that AI can't replace and mastering the skills that AI can't commoditize. So if you're sick of generic business advice and you want something that you can actually use, then stay with us today, because by the end of this conversation, you'll feel like you have a simple way to spot exactly why most SMEs get stuck, what to fix, and how to build an ecosystem around you so you stop guessing and start scaling. So today's guest is Neil Kilgour, CEO and co-founder of CH4B, Central Hub for Business, and the founder of what they call the Bank of Knowledge, built to help business owners get the right answers to the right people so that they can make the right next move without wasting months going down the wrong rabbit holes. So Neil, welcome to the show. For anyone meeting you for the first time, do you want to give us a bit of a whistle-stop overview, who you are, what CH4B does, and why you built it, I suppose?
Sure. So I think first of all, perhaps I'll give you a little bit of an overview of myself. So I have worked in sales most of my life. So I started off in sales. And when I started my first business, which was in the home improvement sector about 25, 30 years ago, that was my main skill set. And so I started off with a couple of home improvement companies sort of 25 years ago. I've had a number of different businesses in different sectors. And during COVID, Nicola and I were working, this is my business partner, Nicola. We were working on another project, and we had a lot of our clients that were coming to us and asking us for advice and support where they didn't know where to get it. And so we just started supporting them, and that was really where CH4B was born. CH4B stands for Central Hub for Business. And what we've created is a central hub for business owners to be able to access everything they need in one place. There's obviously quite a bit to it, but that's essentially what we do. So if a business owner needs anything for their business, whether it's support with HR, accountancy, sales and marketing, whatever it is that they need, we've got the resources and support to be able to give them.
Nice. And that's really important, I think. It is, my background, similar to you, was in sales, but, had a few businesses now under my belt. And I think it's always difficult for business owners because there's so many aspects. And I've never met a business owner who's an expert in all of those different aspects. So typically you're good at one or maybe two of those hats. And so it's really, really difficult for business owners, but especially now, I think in this climate, it's probably even more difficult because there's just so many things going on at the moment and things changing so fast as well. So I wonder what from what you're finding at the moment, the businesses that you deal with, like what are the biggest kind of things that businesses get stuck with? Are there any kind of top threes or big things that people tend to always get stuck with?
I think you're right, Dean, and that's our experience as well. Just coming back to what you just said, that, every business owner we talk to, they have a skill set in a certain area, but of course, nobody's an expert at everything. And so we all need support in various areas, depending upon where our skill set is. And I think that the biggest thing I think that people get stuck with is, depending upon the size of the business, of course, but a lot of business owners are stuck with the fact that there's not enough time in the day to do the amount of work that they think they need to do. I And that's the
Mm.
biggest one. Time is the biggest issue for most business owners, and they find that they're
Yeah.
doing everything or too much in the business, and they just can't never get round to doing all of the jobs that they need to do. And that's quite a common
Yeah.
thing that people mention to us, sort of getting overwhelmed with the amount of work that there is to do to be able to even stand still, let alone move forward. And let's face it, running a business today is very difficult. It isn't as easy as a lot of people think. There's quite a bit to it. So having some structure and having a plan is why that is so important, particularly nowadays.
Yeah, and I think I always think that there's different sizes and stages of business, and so sometimes I speak to some what I would call one-man bands, and let's face it, now with AI, you can have a one-man band that's turning over, six figures plus. That's possible these days, where it might not have been possible, going backwards. But then I think there's this kind of and you might see it differently, so it'd be interesting to get your thought on that. But I see like the three kind of stages of a business. So, you can keep it nice and small, and it could just be just for you, and it could be, that almost freelancer type business. And then, someone wants to scale maybe, and they kind of the next stage is kind of maybe, 5 to 10 employees and some kind of like boutique kind business that maybe you can get to 6, 7 figures. But that drop, I think, is where you see a lot of businesses fall there, that cavity of death between how do you go from one, and the challenge then to go to 10 employees is like that's a huge drop in itself, isn't it? Like that risk to go for a proper business where you take yourself out of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's two main steps where there's big challenges in sort of taking it to the next level. And I
Mm,
think that's why the first thing we would do when we spoke to a business owner is find out exactly what it is that they want to achieve and where they
yeah,
are right now. Because funnily enough, it's really interesting that a lot of people that you speak to, they're not actually very clear on what they want or where they want to go. And when you start asking
yeah.
lots of questions around that, it's quite thought provoking, and they start thinking about, I'm not sure about that, and it sort of gets them thinking about what they really want from their business. I think it's very easy to go into work every day and carry on doing the job that you're doing without really having an idea on what the end goal is. So the first thing we would do is try and understand exactly what it is that they want to achieve. And then once we've established that, then we would be able to support them in creating a plan to be able to get there. But you're right in what you said, that the first stage is you see often somebody that's self-employed working on their own, and the first step is, I want to build this business and maybe employ a couple of people to support me with this additional work that I've got. And that's often the first step. Quite a lot of people will employ somebody and then 6 months or a year down the track decide that's not for them and go back to working on their own.
Well, the thing is as well, because there's a point there, isn't there? That you might be very good at running a business and you've learned those skills, but are you a good leader? Because the minute you start to take on
Exactly.
other people, there's a whole host of other things that need to come into that. Which, yeah, maybe I imagine quite a lot of people struggle at that point with those other
Yeah.
skills.
Yeah, definitely. And as I say, we're all learning on the job, so to speak. Everybody, a lot of people, if you haven't done it before, you might have the skills of that particular, your normal skill set, but all of a sudden running a business, you've got to learn lots of other things and rely on lots of other people to be able to take that business to that next level. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to do it on your own.
Absolutely. And then the support becomes really key. It's funny because I follow a lot of content from the likes of like, Alex Hormozy and Stephen Bartlett and, Daniel Priestley. And a couple of times, well, quite a lot lately, I've heard different people saying the same kind of thing, that, to strive to be an entrepreneur is incredibly difficult. So the other thing in the middle that we didn't mention before is the why, I suppose. So you talked about what I would say is the vision. What do you actually want? Because if you're not crystal clear on that, then you're moving towards what, the unknown. but then the why as well. Like, why do you want that? Because if you're going to go from one person, because if you have a nice income and that's enough to pay the bills and it's to look after your family and you've got that, why would you want to then have to manage people and learn payroll and set up systems to grow? The why's got to be fairly strong, you'd imagine.
And a lot of people don't put anywhere near enough importance on that. They think, oh, I think a lot of people look at that and think, oh, I don't need goals. I know what I want to do. But as you said, to be really clear on that, and why you want it, is really important. But not only to do that now, but also to review it perhaps once a year. And just because that can change as well. It might be that today you've got this vision of creating a business to a certain level. And then when you review it in a year's time, it might be that that vision's changed slightly. It could be that you want to grow the business even bigger, or it might be that you don't, or you want to go in a different direction. But I think it's always sensible to review that sort of thing once a year to make sure that you're still on the right path.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's really important. I read a statistic from UK Business Statistics that said only just under 4% of UK businesses ever scale to £1 million, which is incredible. I thought that was really low. Is it? Yeah, maybe. When I saw that, I thought, wow, that's low. Would that be? Would you expect it to be that?
Yeah, I would, because I think there's a lot of businesses that, you know, start small, maybe have two or three people working with them, and they're happy or they're comfortable keeping it at that size. I think,
Yeah.
like you said earlier, once you start getting over 10 employees, it's at that point that you start having to consider quite a few other areas. So in a lot more detail, HR, and structures within business once you get over sort of 10 employees. So I think that there's many businesses out there that are either, a very small amount of people that's easy to manage. And then if you want to build the business to a much bigger level, I think there's a lot more infrastructure that needs to be put into a business to be able to grow a business to the level where you've got, tens or a number of employees.
And I know you work with businesses across all kind of sectors and different shapes and sizes. Is there a kind of a sweet spot, or is it literally it could be,
Well,
massive
for us, I mean, we've
multi-million?
got business members in various sectors, and of all different sizes. We've had some members actually join before they actually started their business, and they wanted to some support in creating a plan and having the advice before they actually started.
No.
For, and we've also got some businesses, some members that are multi-million turnover, 30, 40 million pounds turnover. However, I think our main focus is businesses between sort of 500,000 up to about 5 million turnover. And there's a lot of businesses within that sort of category that have been in business for a few years, perhaps. They've done very well to get their business to that level, but they now want to take it to that next level,
Yeah.
and they need that extra support and structure to be able to be able to deliver that.
So talking about then the hub, um, so that's built for that very reason. Um, so do you want to give us a bit of an overview for what CH4B can offer in that scenario?
Yeah, so CH4B, Central Hub for Business, predominantly there's two key areas to our business. We have we've created this sort of business growth blueprint, which is 12 principles basically that we follow, that supports business owners, and we have a number of business coaches that support those members. So, and then in addition to that, we have an expert partner directory where we have up to about 100 expert partners in all different areas of business that's there to support those businesses for anything that they need. So if a business needs an accountant or somebody in HR, or some support with sales and marketing, we've got a number of experts there that they can access.
And I suppose that's important because there's lots of options, but so often in business you kiss a few frogs, right? That kind of the vetting process.
Yes, I mean, when I look back in my career to when I first started, I remember actually, making, when I look back, there was a couple of decisions that I made where one was actually with an accountant and one was with a marketing person, actually, where, we went and looked at 3 or 4 different options, made a decision on who we were going to move forward with. And then we moved forward. And then really 6 months down the track, we realized that it was the wrong decision. And the
Yeah.
problem is, once you get to that point, is you've spent a lot of money, obviously, on, with that person to achieve what they've achieved, but also you've lost that time. So that decision really is quite fundamental, isn't it? Because it's not only the money, it's the time you've lost and the momentum in actually achieving whatever it is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So if I'd have had something like what we've built at that time, it may have been that we'd have been less likely to have appointed the wrong person in those positions, which meant that we would have been able to achieve what we did sooner or quicker, and obviously less cost. So I think some of our partners, we've got multiple partners in different areas. So it might be that we perhaps have might have 3 or 4 in different marketing sectors. So our members would be able to look and choose which one that which one they wanted to work with.
Sure. And again, I think that's so incredibly important because when you start your business and what probably for years afterwards, even actually, it can get quite chaotic, can't it? And so you can be, and we talk about headspace, so often it can be quite difficult to have that freedom in your headspace, and so those decisions, making a wrong decision, can be really, really impactful and costly. And then yeah, like you say, what do you do afterwards? Because you feel like you've wasted the time. But with anything in business, I suppose you're going to have some wins and you're going to have some losses, but you got to move on and move forward.
I suppose we're all going to make mistakes, aren't we? Every
Yeah.
business makes mistakes, and I think it's being able to learn from those mistakes quickly and move forward. But if you can have something that supports you in making less mistakes than perhaps you would on your own, then that's only going to help the speed and the progress that you're going to make.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds fabulous to me. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? The other thing I wanted to discuss with you was the bank of knowledge side of things. So because that's incredibly important as well, because it's quite difficult. One of the things as an entrepreneur is, and I know most of the people who are watching will feel this, is that you got to keep constantly learning, and things move too. So it's how do you keep up? So do you want to tell us a little bit about the bank of knowledge and what how that could help
Yeah,
people?
so the bank of knowledge fits in really well with what we do at CH4B with the coaching, because we believe, as you said, that there's nowhere near enough education, learning and development in most businesses.
Yeah.
And what we have done is we've created some training, both some of them we've got sort of training videos, and we also do live training and online training. So it's all different types of training, but we've created what we call the Knowledge Vault, which is a series of training videos that are quite short videos that people can access as and when they require them.
Hmm.
And our members would pay a monthly fee for access to that, and we would normally support them in creating some time within their employees' working week to be able to put some time aside for learning and development, and then we would support them with that. depending
Nice.
upon, whether that be management training or whether it be health and safety training. And a lot, the training that we have, a lot of it is all accredited. And yeah, so we have there's various different training
Excellent.
options available.
Sure. And I'll throw another stat at you because I think it was a really interesting one. So this one's from McKinsey and Company. So businesses operating inside ecosystems grow revenue twice as fast than those using isolated suppliers. So it goes back to that point. It's not just about can you get the right suppliers and have these suppliers been vetted, but that ecosystem, adds huge value to businesses to be part of something that they feel, but it's also going to help them double their revenues, in
Well, it's
theory.
interesting you say that because quite often when we bring a partner in to support one of our members, we quite often bring multiple partners in different areas that actually work together. So you find that a lot of businesses, for instance, might talk to their accountant about, their business and their finances, and then they might go and have a conversation with a financial advisor, and then they might go and speak to somebody, for instance, about their tax. It could be their accountant, but it could be somebody separate. And then you might get them speaking to somebody about their wills and that sort of thing. But they're all actually integrated. But a lot of people actually just speak to independent people about these different things. So what we try and do is bring all of that together under one roof and get, although they're individual specialists, making sure that they understand what they're doing in each of those departments. And that is really valuable because, for the accountant to be aware of all of those other things that they're doing could be quite significant in what the accountant is delivering for that client.
Yeah, and that's common as well, isn't it? Each individual person that you deal with knows that little bit, and then you end up with, lots of different partners, but perhaps they don't know, what's going on. So we're saying that that's more integrated if it's part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, and we try and be the catalyst of that, and try and pull in whatever they need at the right time, and then ensure that the information is in the right place.
Okay. And so kind of let's talk about for the viewers then, going off script a little, I suppose. Business in general. So, what do we see as the main challenges from your point of view in 2026? Has anything changed, like going into this year that the viewers might want to think about and put some thought into?
Well, I think there's an awful lot changing. I think everybody can see there's a lot changing in lots of different areas, from employment law to, I know there's a lot of changes in employment law to
Well, AI is a big one.
AI. Obviously, is a big one
Wow.
coming.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of changes happening, and I think it depends upon the industry as well. Some industries are going to be affected differently by different changes, but so
Things
yeah.
like CSR, I suppose. I heard the other day that, well, the changes in CSR and ESG and stuff like that. So it's a constant changing world, I suppose.
Well, particularly with the size of businesses that I mentioned to you that are our ideal avatar, if you like, the sort of
Yeah.
500,000 up to 5 million turnover businesses. I think that is something that is a common problem, where the business owner is often a big bottleneck in the business, and things aren't either getting done, or the business isn't driving forward, or because the business owner's trying to do too much.
Yeah.
And then obviously they get overwhelmed, and that's a very common problem. So
Yeah.
how do you resolve that? I mean, there's lots of different ways you can resolve it. The first thing is ensuring that you've got the right team of people around you. I think that's the first thing, ensuring that you've got people that are aligned with your values, that you can trust them, and that you can delegate some of the tasks that you do to those people to be able to free up that time to work on the business rather than in it. And I think that's quite often one of the first steps, is getting people to free some time up to actually spend some time discussing and looking at and working on the business rather than just in the everyday
And
activities.
that is so incredibly difficult to do. And I know I've done it. I've done it recently where, we're trying to scale up. And so we've brought some people in. And part of that means that you need to slow down to train, but also you need to think of, well, what about the systems? What about the processes? And there's certain, standard operating procedures. And, those things need to be looked at. Otherwise, there's no point bringing someone in because it's going to, it becomes an issue. So
I think it's a
it's,
discipline though, Dean, as well,
yeah.
because if you think about it, people will find time to do other stuff, whether it be, go and play golf or go to the football or spend time with their families, which is all important things, by the way. But, you know, scheduling time each month to actually sit down and review and look at the business is as important as any of those things and everything else that happens in the business. Probably more important because it then gives you that clarity on what needs to be done the rest of the time. But most
Mm.
people miss it. Most people will say, "I haven't got time for it," but they'll find time for all those other things. And those that do invest the time in a few hours a month in sitting down and working on the business, they're the ones that will really get the real momentum. So that would be, I think, probably the key message for any business owner that is overwhelmed, working too many hours, not achieving what they want to achieve. That would be the one thing that I think would make the biggest difference.
Yeah, and I would echo that. And that slowing down and taking some time out is incredibly important, but even though it's incredibly painful to do. So and so those businesses that might be listening that maybe they're realizing that they're potentially the bottleneck to some of the things in the business, and I'd imagine that comes down to different areas. So it could be, that they want to be the final safety net for everything, approve everything, try to be perfection on everything. But much like when you take on an employee, if you don't let them make mistakes, if you don't let them learn, how can they ever be an expert? Unless, of course, you hire an expert as an employee. But typically, we hire people with room to grow, and you want learning and development to help them to grow. But part of that is allowing them. And as business owners, that's one problem, I suppose, that we can have. The need to check everything is another. The lack of building systems, and if you're going to put standard operating systems in, then that's another area you need to slow down and do that work first. Creating pillars and all those kind of areas. I mean, any advice for people in those areas, or what do you think is the most common area that people could get out of their own way if they just did this one thing?
Well, first of all, one thing I would say to you, just covering all of what you just covered there, was
Mm.
that many years ago,
Yeah.
I can remember a mentor of mine. He was the owner of a big company that I worked for when I was quite young, actually. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he said to me, I think I must have mentioned that at some point in the future I'd like to start my own business. And I remember he said to me, "Neil, if ever you start a business, the one bit of advice I would give you," he said, "is go and find 6 or 7 people that are much better than you." Because I think I must have asked him what would be the one bit of advice, and that was the bit of advice he gave me, and it really stuck with me because the reality
That's
is
great advice.
it is great advice, but most people would feel uncomfortable about employing people that were better than them in their business because they would just feel uncomfortable with doing that if somebody had more knowledge than them. But that was probably the one best piece of advice, and I've tried to achieve that. So maybe you're talking to the wrong person, Dean, because I've got 6 or 7 people that are better than me. So you know,
Yeah.
so and I look at my job as the visionary of the business and making sure that we've got the things in place to be able to take us to that next level. But it's about having people that are better than you in different areas, and if you can achieve that, obviously it makes your life a whole lot easier.
And you've made your job sound really easy, but let me tell the audience, being a CEO is not easy, and being the visionary is not easy. But the other thing is, it's great that you can have people who are much better than you, but you still got to take them on your vision. So I think that's probably something that you've dumbed it down, but actually is a hero's job to get them to buy into the vision and then execute that vision.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I suppose so. I mean, it's important that the company has the right vision, of course, but I think it's too easy to, I would always now try and employ the best person I could for the job. I know that's an easy
Yeah.
thing to say, but whatever the job is, I think you're better off paying a little bit more and getting the best person that you can for it, rather than looking at the other end of the spectrum, which we have done in the past, in various businesses. And I
Yeah.
think that having the right people in your business, even if it costs you a little bit more, will pay huge dividends in the future. And
What's
also,
your
it makes it more comfortable then, Dean, for you to allow them to make mistakes as well. Because if you've got confidence in them that they're better than you at a particular area, it allows you to feel more confident to allow them to make those mistakes.
But it's also very brave, Neil, because I'm sure I'm probably not alone in saying that sometimes business doesn't go the way that you want it to have. And a previous business of mine, I took that similar kind of approach and had multiple people who were as good, if not better, than myself, um, and was very incredibly vulnerable in terms of allowing them to help to get involved, to run the business, to look after clients, and try to let them do as much as possible. But then they walked off with the business.
Right.
So we ended up then, but fortunately, people actually liked me, and people buy from people, and I firmly believe that. So it took 4 or 5 months, but we I got the business back. So they ended up losing out. But you still have the pain. You've still got to go and hire those people again. So
Yeah.
so there is that kind of um, trust aspect of it. So, but there isn't. It's a bit like love in that respect. I think I think you've got to trust. There's got to be trust, and for you to be able to bring people in. But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I tell you what my thoughts are on that, and we're working towards this all the time in the business. My
Mm,
thinking is that it doesn't matter what level somebody's working in your business at. Everybody comes to work for three main reasons. They come to work to earn money. They come to work because they either want to enjoy their job or get satisfaction from their job, and they also don't want to work ridiculous hours. So they don't want to be working 120 hours a week, for instance. They want to work some sensible hours. So I
yeah,
think the time that somebody's working, the money that they're earning, and the job satisfaction is what people are looking for. So the more we can work towards delivering on all of those things will allow us to have the best people that are available to do those jobs. And it also means that the people that are with us are never going to want to go anywhere else. And I
yeah,
think
great
there's
vision.
lots of things you can deliver in each of those areas to make sure that happens. I think the first thing is, and we touched on it earlier, AI, about how you can introduce AI to support your business and the people that work in your business. It's not about replacing people, it's about supporting them better. And one of the things we've done there is we've launched this thing called AI Fridays, where
Yeah,
everybody in the business spends a Friday on focusing on learning AI. And then we have a meeting at lunchtime, and then in the afternoon, we spend the afternoon on how they can deliver that within their job roles to save time or to improve efficiencies.
yeah,
That alone, and the goal there, by the way, is to turn our company into a company that just works 4 days a week, so that everybody can have more time. So that we work Monday to Thursday, and everybody has Friday to Sunday as a weekend. Now we're on course to achieving that towards the end of this year, hopefully. There's a target and a goal that we've got to achieve to be able to reach that. But from studies that I've read on that subject, I think that people will get a lot more out of working a good 4 days and having 3 days off than they will working 5 days. If you'd have
Yeah.
asked me that question 20 years ago, I'd have given you a completely different answer, by the way, because
You,
I,
we
I used to work 80, 100 hours a week in a job, and that was just how it was. But
yeah,
uh, so and then it's about making sure that people are in the right roles that they enjoy, because obviously if people are coming to work and they're not enjoying it. Another example, we've just recently taken on two SDRs that are, making outbound calls, and as we know, a lot of people don't like making telephone calls. They don't want to pick the phone up and speak to somebody. If you've got the wrong person in that job, doesn't matter how much you pay them or how many hours they work, they're not going to last very long. So making sure somebody's in the right job and giving them
yeah. And
support, making sure they
that job
enjoy it.
also, Neil, is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Years I probably at one point described myself as the world's best telemarketer. I think I was just had a big ego. But but ran call centers, managed call centers for 6 or 7 years, and ran a telemarketing agency as well. But I still stand by that is one of the toughest jobs in the world, and there's not many sales directors or managing directors who could do that job to the level of some people that just do it very well. So I think you're right. That's a heart-wrenching job if you aren't very good. That's a very tough job if you don't know how to have conversations and communicate. But over the phone, you've just got your voice. That's all
Yeah.
you've got. So yeah, so you've picked
That's
a
my background as well. I mean,
is
that's where
it?
I really started out on the telephone making calls, and like you say, it was, and particularly I'm as the fact that I'm dyslexic. So I remember just being given a script and saying, "Right, just read that and pick the phone up
Yeah,
and
get on the phone.
get on the phone and do it." And I'm sitting there reading this script, and I was a bit dyslexic anyway, so trying to read the script and have conversation, it was just, it took a little while for me to get my head around that. But
Yeah.
it's a great way of learning, because you need to be able to communicate when you're talking to somebody on a one-on-one basis. So going through that was, I think, a really good education for anybody to do it.
And just as an interesting story, just because I like the story. When I started out doing that, I started out in a timeshare scenario, and which was really interesting. I was 18 years old. I'd just been before that. I was doing semi-professional football. I got a gig, my first paid little football match, and I dislocated my shoulder, and then it just kept dislocating. So I thought, what can I do with one arm? Oh, I could probably pick up a phone and dial. So we did this telemarketing, and I was really good at that. So within 3 or 4 months, I was managing the office, and my boss said to me, "You could probably come upstairs and sell." He said, "But the one problem is you're 18 years old, you look about 15, and no one's going to buy their holidays from someone that hasn't even been on one." And I said, "But I can do it. I'll be fine." So he walked me upstairs and he said, "Look, this is the room and this is what we do." And then he said to me, "But um, I do think it's a bit much for you." And I said, "Well, look, there's only one way to find out. You got to put me in the room." And so I was really cocky back then. And he gave me probably the best bit of advice that's held me to this day. And he said, "Listen," he said, "you're going to have to be better than everybody else. But it doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that you need to, people won't buy from you. People want to buy from who they want to buy from. So you're going to need to walk and talk the act of the person that they want to buy from. And if you could do that, if you could almost like the fake it till you make it kind of thing, but if you could
Yeah.
embody that and you could think big and walk big and sound big and dressed and look the part, and you walk into that room, you might surprise a few people." And I walked into the room on it wasn't day one, it was day two. And I made a 15 grand sale. And it was
Wow.
almost like people looking around the room like, what? What's he doing? So yeah. But
Brilliant. Brilliant.
that was one of the best bits of advice, make sure that you embody it, whatever you do, embody it
Mm.
and have the confidence to see it.
Yeah, I had a similar thing with my son actually when he started working for me in one of my businesses
Mm,
quite a long time ago now. He was 16 when he started and went out selling at 17. And a similar thing, he was very young, and and struggled initially. And I think that's a really good bit of advice. But and in addition to that, it's about knowledge, isn't it? Making sure that you've got the knowledge to answer any question that you're given. So it's about making sure that you do the work to get the knowledge to be able to be that person that client wants to speak to.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. One of the other things he said, you can teach anyone the sales skills, and you can teach anyone the product knowledge. So you can get that knowledge and you can get the skills. He said, but I'll tell you, you can't teach anyone the ability.
yeah,
So when you get in the room, we'll find out whether you have the ability. And I loved that. And so that's how I used to train salespeople. I would say, but I think that's true also for business owners, isn't it? In terms of you don't start a business with all the knowledge. So that's where the bank of knowledge is incredibly powerful and valuable. And the hub, I'd imagine for business owners is because they can't have all of the knowledge. And if we, if we as entrepreneurs act like the master, we probably don't get very far. Whereas if we act like the dummy and become a sponge for all the information, which is what you serve up, I guess.
exactly. And whenever you start anything, isn't it? You can look back if we look back today, whatever age you are and whatever experience you've got, and you look back 20 years or 10 years or whatever, you'll look back and think, you know so much more today than what you knew 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But at that time, you think you know quite a lot. But the
Yeah.
reality is you don't until you get to this age. And we'll probably think the same again in another 20 years when we look back. And we think we know it all now, but in 20 years' time, we'll look back and we'll say, no, we don't. And I think that, you know,
Yeah.
like you said, knowledge is power. And if you can set aside some time to develop yourself just in little steps, it's just like going to the gym every day, isn't it? Those little tiny, that little half an hour you do every day. If you could do it every day and you had the discipline to do it, you build that fitness and muscle over a period of time. It's exactly the same with learning in business. And you know, you could achieve 10 years worth of momentum in a year if you apply yourself the right way and put the right structures, systems, and education in place.
And the key thing to that is about actually then applying it. The amount of times I see lots of learning, lots of learning, lots of learning, lots of learning, but there is no applying and failing. And that's the magic. And sometimes applying and succeeding, but let's be honest, you get better at something, you practice. You can't learn to ride a bike without falling off. No one learns to ride a bike. So the failure part of it, people should accept as to become great at something. It's pick up a new skill, fail, and then succeed.
And I think that's where the regular communication comes in. If you're, for a business owner to allow us to support them and hold them accountable for some of those things. It's easy to sit there today and say, yeah, I'm going to do that next week. And then when next week comes, because it's uncomfortable or there's other stuff you do and then you just don't get it done. But if you allow yourself to have somebody to hold you accountable for certain things that you've said that you want to do, we all need somebody to hold us to account.
I
We
think
all,
that's really important. I mean, you won't find a sports person who's won anything. In fact, you won't find many people who've succeeded in anything without a coach.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that's incredibly important. You're right.
Well, look, I
And
have a business coach now, Dean. I hadn't had a business coach up until probably 6 years ago. And
yeah,
I've been in business a long time. And it was without doubt the best thing I've ever done. In fact, I've had two business coaches at some points because that cover two slightly different areas. I don't think it matters how
mm,
experienced you are, what knowledge you've got, but to have somebody professional that you can talk to that can support you in your you're not going to agree with everything they say necessarily, but it's having somebody there that can support you through that journey has
yeah,
a massive impact.
I'm all for it. I mean, for the last year, I've been invested in a business coach for the last 18 months. Um, and you're right, it's incredibly valuable. Sometimes I think, what are they actually doing other than holding me to account and discussing my ideas and then trying to, um, but on the other hand, like it's incredibly valuable. Like that, the little nuggets of experience that that person brings also um, leaves me more in a sense of knowing and not questioning, because it can be quite a lonely place at the top if you can't speak to the wife or the husband about it, or typically because sometimes they're not always on the same level, or they're not also a business owner, so they can't really understand it in the same way. So it leaves and I find if I talk to someone who doesn't almost like there's no point in me having the conversation, because it's more stressful for me to try to get them to where I am. So that's incredibly valuable as well, to just to have a conversation with someone who gets it, who knows what you're talking
Well, like you
about.
said, I mean, you can, and a lot of people do talk to their wife or their husband about their work or whatever. But the
Mm.
reality is, unless they've got an understanding to a certain level, you might get misinformation or the wrong advice because there isn't that understanding. So it's about making sure
Yeah.
you're talking to the right person that's going to be able to give you or understand the right level of support, depending upon what it is.
And I want to touch a little bit more on AI, but now you've mentioned that. You keep mentioning things that I find really, really, really interesting. And I think that's really important, because there's a saying that I go by that someone once said to me, which is never take advice from somebody who hasn't done it. If plenty of people want to give you advice, plenty more people want to give you a nice tip, but if you're looking and that what they have actually done doesn't amount to what you want to achieve. So I suppose from that aspect as well, it's incredibly valuable to have someone like yourselves to get that advice from, because you've helped multiple and done it yourselves.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing there, and I think we talked offline earlier about, I think you mentioned about, what's the difference between what we do and a normal business coach or coaching company. And I
Yeah.
think the one of the biggest areas of support or advantage there is that we have a whole team of people that are experts in different areas. So, if somebody's working with one of our business coaches that's got experience in business, of course, they've also got the support of all of our expert partners and all of the experts in different areas. So if there was something that came up that we needed to look at and dive deeper into a certain area, we've got that support and structure around us to be able to deliver that. And I think, that's really important, because it doesn't matter, even if you're a business coach, ultimately, just the same as a business owner, you can't know everything. So you have to be able to have that resource to be able to get that information if you need it.
Sure. Um, and so I want to touch on AI, and then also kind of partnerships, because I think um, kind of building on your own is much more difficult than if you have others who almost become like your salespeople, your partnerships, and whether that's affiliate partnerships or whatever those partnerships look like. But from an AI point of view, it's an interesting one, that isn't it? Because there's AI in all sorts of different areas, um, and there's the automation aspect, which I think businesses they're just going to have to do, automate certain parts of the business,
Mhm.
or they might fall behind to others that do. Um, so what's your thoughts on the kind of the AI for automation to start with, I suppose, for businesses? And you mentioned you're doing that on a Friday, like you're trying to do it, or you're doing it yourselves as well. Do you help others with that?
Well, I think the first thing was learning ourselves and looking at how we can implement it within our business. Because obviously, if we didn't do that first, then how can we support other businesses? So I think
Yeah.
I read a few articles about a year or so ago, and I thought we need to make a decision to really embrace this, because it's not going away. I don't think, and a lot of people have commented to me, they don't think it's as good as they want it to be right now, and maybe it's not in certain areas, but it is growing and developing so quickly. Um,
Mm.
I understand that the power of AI is doubling every sort of 3 to 4 months, and in 5 years' time, it's going to be a completely different level to where we are today. So, but all we've got to go on right now is where we are today. And I think when you look at what AI can deliver in a business, it can deliver all sorts of automations that save time. And that's the biggest commodity for every business, about how can we look at introducing AI into whatever positions that you've got within the business to support those individuals to save them time so that they can use their skills for a longer period of time in the areas that you want them to be working. So, whether that's using AI to reduce the amount of time you spend on your emails, or whether it's, recently as I think I mentioned to you, we recruited a couple of people into the business, and I know we used AI within that process that not only saved us quite a lot of time in, reviewing CVs and all sorts of areas. I wasn't involved in that process, in fact, but I know it was used quite a bit within that process. And in addition to that, it saved us about 15 grand in fees that we would have had to have paid if we'd have gone to an agency. So, there's lots of different areas in which it can be used, and I think that every business should really embrace it to a degree and use it to and start that process. But as I said, over the next few years, that will develop further, and there'll be lots more opportunity. I think that there won't be any, I can't see any business. It'll be like today, if you go back 40 years ago, nobody had a computer in their office. It was all done paper, and I think
or the internet.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think in a very short period of time, every single business will be utilising AI to quite a degree.
And I think the challenge for, if you're watching, I think it's a challenge you're thinking, well, yeah, we probably should do that. And often that's kicked down the line a little bit. But it comes back to that. You've got to slow down enough to deal with the project, to implement it, to then enjoy the time savings. So there's the pain up front for the benefit later. I think a lot of people are putting it off.
There is, but that actually is not as bad as I think people think, because you can actually put a little bit of time in to save some time, and as long as you then utilize the time that you've saved to reinvest in going deeper, that's the key. If you save the time and then use it for something else, then obviously you're not going to make progress with it. But if you
yeah, that's a good tip. Yeah, save the time and then use
if
that.
you agree 2 hours a week, for instance, and spend that 2 hours, and then you can save another hour and then use that hour into AI, and then it will snowball.
And I think the key as well with I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying, that it's not. I think you mentioned on it earlier, it's maybe not good enough. It maybe not. But and I said to that person, no, I don't think that's true. I think that it is fantastically good enough. I just think that the people who are making a success out of that at the moment are the ones who have critical thinking and that kind of ability to prompt better. And I think sometimes it's like a mirror for me. Like it's a, if the prompt is perfect, actually it's incredible, the power. But you get what you put in. And so I feel like we need to, if you're watching, you probably want to be thinking about finding a course on prompt engineering, because that's a huge thing. And that would clear, if you could understand how to prompt properly, and better, and just learn that skill, then it becomes so much easier.
Yeah, and a lot of the answers that you get from, for instance, ChatGPT, which is one of the biggest that people use, but a lot of information that you can get from there is not necessarily correct or misleading or whatever. And you're right; it all comes down to how you ask it the question. And somebody said to me, when I first looked at it and sort of read up a little bit about it, is that there's so much information out there that obviously a proportion of that information is going to be wrong and some of it's going to be right. So it's about fishing in the right pool, if you like. It's about,
you've got to fact check.
Yeah, using the right prompt. So I think, asking it to act in a certain way. So if you wanted, for instance, some information on, I don't know, let's say a health issue, your heart issue, for instance, you could prompt it to ask it to act like a top surgeon at a particular hospital or
Give it
whatever.
a role. Yeah.
and give it a roll, and then you're going to get more accurate information that comes back rather than
Yeah.
just asking the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And so definitely go and have a look at, how can I make it work for me? And it's probably going to get that 10%, 20% better, how that works. I think there's an interesting other angle as well for people to look at. Because, for us, like we work with a lot of businesses in content creation. And so that's not a skill. I don't meet many business owners, CEOs, managing directors that we might work with that say, oh, do you know, I just love to get my camera out and go on video. None of them. Like it's
Yeah.
more, I don't want to do that. It's not for me. Okay, but so now I have to, or maybe my leadership team have to, or so the penny's kind of dropping that they have to do stuff. But it's funny because we're moving through a period, and I think it will be a defining period towards the end of this year, which is that there's so much AI content. And I'm looking at some of the things that can be produced. I could create a video of you. I wouldn't know if it's you or not you. You probably wouldn't even know if it's you or not you.
It is
Um,
amazing, isn't it?
and that's dangerous world that we live in. Um, However, what I'd say is AI is good at most of the kind of what's almost transactional, like it can give you the information. But what it can't do, it's not good at being messy. It's not good at being raw. It's not good at making mistakes. It's not good at humor. It's not good at,
Mm,
it's all perfect and polished.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think we're going to reach a world where, from a content aspect for businesses, if they're worried about, well, how do I do content? How do I tool overwhelm and all that kind of stuff? Um, I think it's almost to say if you're watching, then don't worry so much because you as a person is going to be your biggest selling point. The failures of the human being, like, and those raw things that make them not want to pick up the camera is the
Mm,
very reason why they should be picking up the camera right now, because
mm,
it's all about raw authenticity and the algorithms love it
mm.
because it's becoming kind of unpopular, this AI side of things. So I think for those, and that probably comes down to people who are thinking maybe they're going to lose their jobs. Well, I don't know. I don't know because you can't
It's going to
replace
be
the
really
SDR.
interesting to see where it goes. And I think,
Yeah.
like we said earlier, I've read and have been told for many years that I should build a personal brand and, get myself in front of the camera. And
Mm.
it's not comfortable. Some things you have to do, some things that you're not completely comfortable with. And I look at, some of the great presenters out there, and yeah, I'd love to be like them, but that's not me. And I've always hidden behind it. I can have a
Mm.
one-on-one conversation with an individual and talk about their business and get into the detail and support them in various different ways. But when you all of a sudden have to create a video or you have a conversation that lots of people are going to look at, it's different. It's completely different, and it takes a little while to get used to that. But I do agree that when people see something that's real, perhaps people can identify that we're not all perfect. When we're
Yeah.
as a business owner, we all make mistakes. We're all human beings, and I suppose it's being able to identify with the people that you're listening to or talking to that you know they're similar to you, and we've all made
I
those mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, we've you come from an era like me where you feel like but you can't possibly show people weakness, but it used to be
Mm,
like we can't do that. You can't because then you're gonna make yourself look silly. Um there's a stat from the Edelman Trust Barometer. 81% of consumers say trust is a deciding factor in who they buy from. But then equally from Gartner, people are 5 times more likely to trust someone and buy from someone who's made a mistake.
mm,
So this whole polished vision of, you know, actually people find it more authentic if you do make mistakes because you're more like them and people want to buy from people like them. As long as you don't go too far and you're a buffoon on camera, but if you have the experience but with a little bit of authenticity, the
mm.
stats say maybe that helps you.
Well, it's funny you say that, and you're right how things are so different today in business to what they were 20, 30 years ago. I
Yeah.
could, my first business, I made, when I look back now, just made so many mistakes that when it failed, I was so embarrassed that I'd never talked to anybody for years about the mistakes I made and what happened. But in actual
Yeah.
fact, I learned after a while that they were great things to talk about, because people, even though I've made more mistakes than a lot of people that I've talked to and coached, but I don't think it matters, because those mistakes were definitely the biggest learns that I've ever had, and definitely wouldn't be here today if I hadn't have made those mistakes.
Well,
You
that's
know?
like riding the bike, isn't it? That's the
Yeah,
falling off of riding the bike. That's what made you. And similarly for me, I feel that way. Business one and business two, were where a lot of the mistakes were made, that you learn from. Um, what do you think that we haven't discussed that would be really valuable for the audience? Like, is there some tips you'd like to leave the viewers?
um, is there some tips I'd like to leave the viewers? What have we not discussed? I think
Well, let me start with a couple that I'd like to leave them, and then you can think of a couple as well.
okay.
So I think don't get too overwhelmed. I think 2026 is a noisy world, and I think we're running around potentially with chaos, and the headspace is a kind of a chaos space. So my advice to the audience would be lead from the heart. Um, know your goals and your visions as we discussed. Know the steps that you want to get to and what you want to achieve. Try and have a sense of knowing, and then just try to do good. You'll probably find somewhere along that line, as long as you're clear of what the goal and the vision is, you're going to end somewhere near. So, you know, calm down, relax a little, slow down a little, give yourself time to learn, give yourself time to reflect. And that's so hard to do, because I think if you're an inexperienced entrepreneur, you're running at 100 miles an hour. You mentioned working 70 hours a week. That used to be said as a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I think if you hustle, then yeah, I mean, the chances are if you do more work, the likelihood is you might get more results. But the reality is that slowing down is such a huge piece, that, and loving yourself and being kind to yourself, that sometimes we miss. So you could have someone working really, really hard, but maybe they just don't have the right goal or the right nous to see it through along that journey. And so, well, that would be my advice: is find time to go a little bit slower and relax and be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I agree. And I think coming back to some of the points that we've discussed today, Dean, as I mentioned earlier, I think the most important thing is creating some time to review what you've done and what you're going to do. Taking
Yeah.
some time out to work on the business rather than in it, and to have somebody there to support you with it, whoever that is. Find the right person that can support you with that journey. I think that in is the one thing that stands out to me that would have the biggest impact for most business owners.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I would echo that. And I think it's so incredibly powerful that you have the hub for business, um, for that support, but also the vetted partners for, the people to go to when you don't know and maybe you want to know. And if it's not a vetted partner, you've got the bank of knowledge in order to learn the skill that they might need to just upskill themselves if they don't want to use a partner. So I can see that ecosystem becomes incredibly valuable. So what I'll do is I'll put a link in the comments for anyone that could use that kind of support.
Brilliant.
And hopefully there's some things that we've discussed that gives them some food for thought going into 2026, that helps them to win in business.
Dean, yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate that. And hopefully there was a little bit of value there somewhere for people to hear.
Yeah, I think there will be. I mean, I think anyone who's building anything, it's not easy. So any support that they can get, they're going to find a value. So thank you very much.